All right, Bob, let's go ahead and give it a whirl.
Good evening, everybody. Bob Henderson. I am the CEO Intelligence Services Group and also volunteer for CSNP. So welcome to this month's edition of A Day in the Life of a CISO. And for those of you that aren't familiar with CSNP, it's a cybersecurity nonprofit group. And there is the website. There is the email to learn if you want to contact us, and the LinkedIn and the Instagram and the Twitter social media accounts. Nonprofit group in cybersecurity across North America, I believe Africa and India. If you'd like to volunteer, there is a link where you can volunteer. If you'd like to join us and join your chapter of CSNP, please do so. And we're always looking, obviously, for donation and sponsors because we're a nonprofit and we rely on those donations and sponsorships to be able to run programs like this. So thank you for us coming tonight. And we can't go much further, do a lot of these things without our sponsors. And so we want to thank them for participating and help us with this event this evening. And our guest this evening is Phil Zongo. Phil is CISO of Crestone Wealth Management, and he is from down under in Australia. So Phil, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much.
To be here.
And I want to welcome back Maury Haber, who ducked out on me last month, but he's back. He's back.
Bob, thank you so much. My name is Maury Haber. I'm the CTO and CISO for Beyond Trust. I'll be tonight's moderator for the session. And I want to first off and welcome Phil to the call. Phil and I have recently met in the last 6 months and spoken several times. And I thought he would be a fantastic addition for tonight's public speaking event because his paths, his journey, his experience, and just everything about him really is what CSNP is about. So Phil, let me start with asking you to introduce yourself and just give us a quick background bio of yourself before we get into tonight's session. I'm also going to remind the audience that if you do have questions, please use the Q&A, use the chat, but you may also notice something a little unusual about tonight's session, especially because I asked about locations in the chat. Phil is in Down Under in Australia. So we do have about a 1.5 second lag time from traveling all the way around the world. So if you hear us talk over each other or that odd gap, it's just because we're doing this live, real time, across the planet. Phil, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Maury. Really excited to be here and to chat with you again. A brief background about myself. So I live here in Australia. I've been here for 14 years. I'm originally from Zimbabwe. Arrived in 2007, working for PricewaterhouseCoopers as a senior IT risk consultant. Changed my career a few times and then landed up in an organization called AMP, which is one of the largest financial services organizations here. From there, I then decided to revamp my career path and accelerate myself to cyber executive roles. And that's when my career path really took a sharp turn. And quickly, I landed a role as head of cybersecurity or CISO for Crestone Wealth Management, which is an offshoot of UBS Wealth. And I've been there for maybe 4.5 years. On the sidelines, I also joined up with 2 other industry veterans, my friend called Jan Schroeder, who's the former lead partner for PwC Cybersecurity Consulting here in Australia and Switzerland, and another friend called Darren Argyle, who's the Global Chief Information Risk Officer for Standard Chartered Bank. And we founded an organization called the Cyber Leadership Institute. There we train aspiring and some seasoned CISOs how they can influence senior stakeholders, develop high impact cybersecurity strategies, develop their governance and leadership skills, and just make themselves, accelerate yourself to the CISO role and thrive in there. So that's my career in a nutshell. I do a lot of writing. I authored a book called The 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience, which demystifies the complexity of cybersecurity and passes on practical guidance to senior business leaders. I'm in the process of finalizing my second book, which is My Memoir. It's a story of my life. That's pretty much me.
That's fantastic, Phil. Accomplished author, CISO, living in Australia, but born in Zimbabwe. All right, so let's start personal, and we'll wrap it up at the end by getting into those professional aspects. What is your favorite pastime?
I play a lot of golf.
Golf.
I play a lot of golf. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so let's get started get started with you as a young person growing up in Zimbabwe. We can't necessarily relate in the United States to what that was like, but you've managed to overcome whatever challenges were there and accomplish the goals as an author, as a CISO. But could you give the audience a taste of what it was like growing up and why you left?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, Maury, because the book that I'm just finishing is called The Gift of Adversity, which summarizes my journey. So I grew up in a place called Mondoro, which is communal lands tucked 140 kilometers southwest of Harare. And I grew up in the country. I started from the ditch. I got my first pair of shoes when I was 12 years old. And, fortunately for me, when I topped my grade 7, which is primary education in my village school, my parents had this act of faith. They took me to a better school, which was located 23 kilometers away from home. But because it wasn't feasible for me to run to and from school every day, my father secured a place for me to rent in the township, which was near about a kilometer away from the school. And I moved into rent. I moved out from home when I was 14 years old. And I moved into this one room, which was part of a 3-room structure. My room had no running water. There was no electricity. There were no windows. It had a makeshift unlockable door, which means when I went to bed, I lifted my door and I placed it because it couldn't hinge either side. Further compounding my challenges in that place, the 2 of the 3 rooms were used by the township's 2 of the most prominent prostitutes at that time. So here I was, because I needed to get access to better education. So I lived there for about 3 to 4 years, and that is the period that really changed me and marked me deeply. I used to run back home on Friday nights, 23 kilometers away, barefooted, and run back Monday mornings. But fortunately for me, just to wrap up on my childhood, when I got to Form 1, when I got to the township, the first year of my high school, when I was 14 years old, I was very fortunate. There is this lady from Germany who, for some reason, she came to my village every year for almost 30 years. She identified kids like myself who demonstrated a lot of potential, but they were coming from poor backgrounds. And she went back to Germany and she found sponsors. So, when you sponsor a kid abroad, via World Vision or one of these charities, I am one of those sponsored kids. So I was very fortunate. Someone took a chance on my life and they paid my school fees from Form 1 to Form 6 for the entire high school. And that is pretty much, that's what changed my life. Without that opportunity, there is no chance I would have made it, maybe even to Harare, let alone come to Sydney and be speaking to you this morning. So that's pretty much my childhood in a nutshell.
Phil, I mean, that is absolutely stunning to come from what we would consider extreme poverty and being able to break out and not even have shoes until you're 12 years old. Were you always interested in security, or what was your change in life that you started to get interested into cyber or even start working for PwC?
Yeah, so when I graduated from high school, I was looking for opportunities to go to university. Unfortunately for me, I graduated with 1 point or 1 grade lower than what I wanted. I'd always wanted to study finance. And there I was. There were only 2 universities in Zimbabwe, public universities, and it meant that my dream was dead again. So fortunately for me, I meet a friend, and in Harare, and he said, Zongo, he called me by my second name. I don't think you will make it into the University of Zimbabwe. There is a new university that the government has just opened in Midlands, and they're offering a degree called Information Systems. I had no clue what was information systems. I had barely touched computers in high school. So he said, I think the degree is about repairing cell phones. Cell phones were just a new phenomenon in Zimbabwe. So I was pretty fascinated. I thought, oh my God, if I study this thing, I could be able to repair cell phones and maybe eventually own one myself. Anyway, so I applied and I got accepted. But it was, to study computer science with business studies, a combination. From there, I landed an IT job. I worked for maybe 2 years. That's when, for me, everything up until that time, my dream was always, how do I go back and give my parents who sacrificed so much a dignified life? So I needed to get out of Zimbabwe, because by that time, inflation had reached almost 79 billion%. So anyway, I take a side gig and I start developing websites, and I raised $500, which was a lot of money then, because my salary was way less than $100 per month. And I managed to pay for an exam called Certified Information Systems Auditor. When I passed the exam, opened opportunities for me to join Deloitte back in Zimbabwe. I was there for about 18 months. Then I started applying for jobs overseas again. That's when I got accepted by PwC here in Australia. I got here, worked for PwC, and like I said, I worked in IT risk in Australia for about maybe, almost a decade, or about 8 years. But that's when I realized, I was a jack of all trades, working in IT risk management. I was doing everything, but I was a master of none. But fortunately for me, I was presenting to the IT executive team. I was writing board reports. I was corresponding with regulators. That's when I realized that cybersecurity was dominating boardrooms, and it had zoomed to the top of almost every corporate risk profile. That's when I decided to change my career, jump ship out of IT risk into cybersecurity. And it's a decision that I never regret. That's why I'm sitting here with you.
It's really interesting. Did you find when you first started in IT security that it was hard? Was it natural for you to pick up? Or was it so foreign compared to the high school experience that you had that it was a struggle? In other words, was it a natural pickup for you?
Yeah, I went through several challenges when I moved, but bear in mind that I had spent so many years in IT risk. So I had worked in IT before, so I understood the inner workings of technology. So cybersecurity was a natural stepping stone for me. But when I moved into cybersecurity, I think my biggest frustration was I'm always hungry. I read a lot of books, and I bought books and I downloaded material, but I found the language to be very arcane. It was rooted in technology, and I couldn't really tie it back to what is the implication to the business and the business value chain. Because for me, my goal has always been to translate complex technology matters for senior business leaders so they can make risk-informed decisions. So that was my biggest frustration. I bought books and everything was very, very technical. And that's when, for me, the idea of writing my book, The 5 Anchors, I actually wrote that book for myself. It's a book that I was looking for and I couldn't find. So I thought, this is a good opportunity for me to step in, learn that, accelerate my own learning curve, and also solve a problem for senior business leaders. So that was a challenge for me.
So you basically have done a ton of study. You started hard. You managed to progress past the environment, the education. You thrive through it. But what is one thing that you wish you would have learned or known when you started this journey that only recently or in the last several years you've come to realize or began to understand about your career and your place? What is something that if you could go back to your 12 or 14-year-old self, you wish you could tell yourself?
Yeah, I think the thing that I would tell myself is, the cheese will always move. I'm sure you read the book, which is titled "Who Moved My Cheese." So for me, when I moved to Australia, I lacked that self-awareness. Back home in Zimbabwe and a lot of African countries, technical expertise almost always guarantee you unobstructed ascension into senior roles. If you know what to do, you're very technical, then you are guaranteed to make it in industry. And that is the mindset that I brought when I came to Sydney. When I arrived in working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, I soon realized that that was misplaced. My new environment was way more different to Zimbabwe. Here in Australia, technical expertise certainly was important, but more importantly were the soft skills, your ability to influence critical senior stakeholders, to sell solutions to clients, to communicate with clarity and persuasion, and to solve important problems. That was very important. Unfortunately for me, I stuck my head in the sand like an ostrich, and I paid dearly. When I arrived here in Australia in 2007, I was a senior consultant. 3.5 years later, I was still a senior consultant. But and for me, that created a lot of tension because I'm a very ambitious person, and I found myself stuck in functional roles. A lot of my colleagues were just blazing to the top. And that's when, further compounding matters anyway. Here in Australia, there's not many African-looking people in the circles that I work in, and that was tremendously difficult for me to adjust. I'd lost my familial and friendly bonds, and 2011, I actually reached a tipping point. I resigned from my role at PwC. I terminated my lease. I sold everything, and I flew back to Harare with no intentions of coming back to Australia. So fortunately, the negotiations I had back with Ernst & Young back in Harare, they fell through. And then I came back to Australia after several months. And then I started to rejig my mindset and develop this self-awareness, understanding that solutions that work today won't necessarily work in the next 3 or 4 years. And what works in Australia might not work in America or in Europe. So that self-awareness is something that I wish I had developed earlier, because my cheese certainly moved and I paid dearly.
It's an interesting maturity model that you're stating because it took time, it took your own personal growth. But you also said that you read a lot. And we did get a question from the audience that asks, what books do you find the most helpful in your guidance or helped you mature your thought processes along that journey? So if you could throw out some of the favorite titles and authors that you've liked, I think at least one person in the audience would love to know.
Okay, great. So, and that for me has been a moving target as well. So when I started to revamp my career between January to March in 2015, I read 8 books on business writing. I wanted to write with clarity, with brevity, humanity, and I really studied very hard. One of the best books that I read is called On Writing Well by William Zinzer. Is a classic, and I would recommend everyone to jump on it. I try to read. My target is to read one book every week. And thanks to Audible, because I drive to and from work and I drive a lot, I just tune in and I listen to books. Like I said, it's always been a moving target. When we founded the Cyber Leadership Institute, I realized that it's one thing to know cybersecurity and to be an expert, but for me to start a business and scale it, I needed to master that entrepreneurship knowledge. So I've studied a lot of books on entrepreneurship and business. Then most importantly, I read a lot of books on mindset just to callous my mind, because a lot of things that happened to me It's about, shifting that belief system, believing you can do more, and hardening my mind against a lot of negativity and adversity that comes along the way. One of the best books that I read is called You Can't Hate Me by David Goggins. He's your fellow American, a former Navy SEAL, really powerful books. But, it's always a moving target. On Writing Well by William Zinser is maybe the book that transformed my life the most.
Phil, that is absolutely amazing. Now, you've got all these books in your head. You've been formulating how to progress in your career. You got out of the rut of doing the same thing. What would you say is your biggest accomplishment along this journey from childhood to being a CISO to being an author? What do you take dear to you as your biggest pride, or the statue or the monument that you stand on with?
I think it's no one thing, unfortunately. It's maybe two or three, maybe two. The number one thing I think that I'm very proud of is writing my memoir. I think putting that backstory into 80,000 words has been the most challenging assignment that I've ever undertaken, because, writing about cybersecurity, I'm a business writer. I write for business magazines. Putting that story into words and writing about characters and scenes, it's, I didn't have that skill when I started this journey three years ago. And when I set out to write this book, I said, I'll write it and publish it in 6 months. But I was underestimating the task. So me just going back and reliving those memories, confronting some of the painful moments that I went through, it's been a healing process for me as well. I think that's one thing I'm very proud of. More importantly, though, is, I always try to look back, because like I said, I was very, very fortunate to come out of the situation back in the village. So what we did with the help of my wife and some friends a few years ago is we founded an organization called Education for Rural Africa, where we, with the help of friends and well-wishers, we raise some money and go back to my rural school, and we help kids. We have helped dozens of kids with scholarships. And, just last year, I looked into my social media. I saw an email from a young girl that we had helped so many years ago, saying, I'm very happy that I've graduated with the Bachelor's of Law from the University of Zimbabwe. And I've been hired by one of the most respected legal firms in Harare. And thank you for changing my life. And I think that's, there's nothing, I could not exchange that with $1 million. So I think those are some of the things. And lastly, maybe just giving my own kids opportunities to grow up here in Australia and never go through the challenges that I went through. So that's pretty the three things I'm proud of.
That's really powerful, because I think as a parent, I think Bob would agree as well, we always want our children to be better than ourselves and have more than us. And that accomplishment is huge, knowing that, in my past, my parents came to the States with no money. And I can proudly say my children are successful professionals supporting the community. And that giving back is absolutely huge. Let's switch gears a little bit. You're a CISO. You're in Australia.
Yeah.
You're a peer of mine. How does your peers, or even in Australia, view a lot of the current threats? Our news basically has been riddled with the last 2 weeks of malware, ransomware, state-sponsored attacks, nation-state attacks. Do you have the same problems there, or are our problems being perceived the same way there? And how are you dealing with them?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think the interconnectedness of the global economy anyway, if there's one thing that has come to light over the last few years, is no one is immune to cyber threats. And unfortunately for me, all these issues, and the media is always quick to throw in big words whenever there is a profile data breach, nation states, 0-day vulnerabilities, advanced persistent threats. But when we dig deeper, we always go to dig deeper below the surface. A lot of these cybersecurity issues are what we have been telling businesses and senior business leaders for the last decade. They are largely preventable. So the Australian, we are facing the same situations. We've got very high profile businesses that are being taken offline by ransomware on a very frequent basis. It's always in the news. But like I said, the root cause is mostly preventable. Systems are not patched, they're running legacy applications, cybersecurity, and just investing in cybersecurity and perceiving it as a growth advantage, not as a cost center and a necessary evil. I think that mindset is what got us where we are. So anyway, coming back to your question, definitely we are seeing the same. The mindset is starting to shift, though. The senior business leaders are starting to take heed. I think that's the positive that is coming out of these challenges.
So how do you accomplish some of the goals if across the planet you're seeing the same challenges as us? Our news doesn't necessarily cover an attack or a breach that you're seeing there, but more likely you're seeing ours, right? Unfortunately, that just is what happens. How are you solving for it? Yes, things are preventable, you can patch, but how do you leverage your IT organization to help you?
Can you reframe the question?
Sure. So you have the same challenges. We know we need to patch. We know we need to remove admin rights. How are you discussing this with your organization, your information technology professionals? How are you getting them on board to help you be successful in making sure that you as a CISO, your organization doesn't become the next target?
Yeah, like I said, I think the problems that never lied much in the IT organization. The tone at the top, because with me working at the Cyber Leadership Institute and training and collaborating with CISOs from more than 30 countries, I get to hear perspective. The biggest challenge doesn't necessarily lie in the IT organization. It lies at the top. CISOs, a lot of CISOs, they feel like their voices are hitting brick walls. Their budgets are underfunded. They're always under stress. They're fighting all these threats with very skinny budgets and very small teams. And for me, that's where the challenge begins. When we start to translate cybersecurity in the language of the business and making sure that we bring the most senior business leaders on the journey, I think that's how we change this. But anyway, coming back to your question, here in Australia, I think there is a study that was conducted by an organization called CISO Lens a few years ago, which revealed that more than 95% of all CISOs here in Australia, they report to the CIO. So by nature, the cybersecurity functions, they're still bundled into IT. That in itself comes with a lot of challenge because luckily for myself, in my CISO role, I report to the Chief Risk Officer. It's a really great way because I've got that independent oversight on the IT function. But the CIOs here in Australia, they still have responsibility. The buck stops at them. So you can't really say the CISO reports to the CIO. So it means, it's naturally easy for them to be on the journey because they're responsible for cybersecurity. That comes with some challenges, like I said, in terms of independence, reporting back to the board. But for now, it is pretty much what it is.
That's actually quite a common discussion that we have is where does the CISO sit? Should he be under the CIO? Does he report directly to the CEO? Some cases, even the COO, Chief Operating Officer. And those business models, those organizational charts do make it easier or harder for us as CISOs to get our job done. But I think having the CEO's ear or the CIO's ear really does help accomplish many of the tasks that we need to do every day to protect the company. Phil, we talked about your past. We talked a little bit about what influenced you and how you gained your knowledge. Can you tell us a little bit what your daily routine is like outside of getting out of bed? What is your typical day like?
Yes. So my so because I got two heads, effectively, I try to, of course, just the normal stuff. I wake up early. I do a lot of reading in the morning, and a bit of exercise when I can. Then I go to do my my CISO responsibility at Creston. So I work at Creston most of the time. Then when I finish work, I drive back home. I pick my kids from school and daycare. Then I bath them, I feed them, and do homework, and then take them to bed. Then my other journey with the Cyber Leadership Institute begins. So I jump onto Zoom calls, and then we start facilitating calls. Like I said, we've got cyber leaders from more than 30 countries who have graduated. We run a class of cyber leaders every 2 months, and our other class started just on Monday. So that's when my other gig begins. So it's pretty long. In between, I do a lot of writing. Like I mentioned the last time we met, I try to work around what we call non-negotiable habits, because I realize that my time is very limited, and I need to ruthlessly prioritize the things that I do, because it's very easy to be so busy, to be speaking at conferences and doing a lot of things. So one of my non-negotiable habits, there are two of them. Number one is reading. I have to read every day, and I have to write every day. So I have written every day for the last 6 years, and I will be doing that for quite some time. So because my time is very limited and I have to spend quality time with my kids, that concept of non-negotiable habits has been extremely helpful to me.
Well, Phil, let's back this up, because you and I have had this conversation before. For the listeners on the call, can you give us a definition of what a non-negotiable habit is? Just so everyone gets that concept, because after you and I spoke, I realized I have some of them myself, and I didn't even call it that, but I do them too. And I think that's a trait for most successful leaders. Could you give us a good definition?
Yeah. So a non-negotiable habit is something that I must do almost every day or every day, even when I feel disinclined. I think that's pretty much what it is. When I mentor people, there's always this concept that you need to align what you do with your passion. And I think that's incredibly powerful. The problem, though, is a lot of people don't know how to find that passion. They think, you will find your passion when you are sitting on a leather couch drinking a cold beer. That will never happen. When I started writing, and this is what I tell people, when I started writing, I never enjoyed writing. Everything felt forced. I went through moments of frantic boredom, angry hopelessness, of wanting to quit forever. But I just persisted. I kept doing things that, I wasn't enjoying it, but I knew that writing was very important. If I could write with persuasion and clarity, I could differentiate myself from millions of IT people in the world. So I managed to keep pushing until I reached that level of mental obstruction where, psychologists, they say you find the second wind, you get into the zone. And once I got into that zone, it was a beautiful moment. And writing, I enjoy writing in as much as I enjoy golf, because, it's the creativity, is, going through challenges, it really stimulates me. So non-negotiable habits, it's not necessarily hobbies or things that just come natural to you. It's things that I know are very important, and I have to do them even if I feel like, even if I don't feel like doing them. So I have to force myself. That's a non-negotiable habit for me.
I'm sure my wife would say cooking dinner every night is my non-negotiable habit, but these are personal things to you that you have to do, right? Yeah. They're not, yeah. I'd have to take care of the kids. These are things that are self-improvement.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, true. true. They are definitely optional. And, for me, when I started my journey, it's very important. My goal was to become something like the Tiger Woods of cybersecurity. So having the mindset that elite athletes have in their own disciplines, whether it's cold, it's freezing, Cristiano Ronaldo, whoever, they'll go out and exercise. So I do the same with writing.
It's absolutely one of those self-benefit things that you just get conditioned to do, like exercise.
Yeah.
So we're now in 2021. You've had lockdown. We've had lockdown. We're almost free. Hopefully we don't have another variation in the new normal in COVID. What has changed the most for you in 2021?
What has changed the most for me in 2021? I think it's just having more perspective about life. So in 2020, I think 2020 was more important for me because that's when COVID hit. And I turned 40, and I've always been looking forward to celebrate my 40th. And I had my plans, I had booked my planes, my flights and hotels. I was traveling to Europe to meet Marion Bertram, the lady that I told you paid for my fees 30 years ago. I have never met her in person. So this was going to be one of my happiest moments, to celebrate my 40th birthday and meet her in person. And then 2 weeks before my birthday or my flights, COVID happened, and I never got to meet her. But what this has done to me, is just, giving me more perspective about life, realizing that, in as much as I would have loved to go to Europe, I'm grateful that I'm still alive, I'm healthy, my parents are healthy back home. That's tremendously powerful for me. When I told you that when I lived in the growth point, that was maybe one of the hardest periods of my life. I was barely a teenager then. But when I went back to the village, there were so many boys and girls who died to be in my situation. So for me, that's, tremendously powerful. I see people complain every day, that they cannot, of course we cannot travel. I would love to travel and see my parents, but I'm still grateful that I'm alive. I'm grateful that, in as much as COVID has been, a horrible thing to the entire world, there's one or two positives that have come out, especially this remote connectivity. Now, I'm presenting to conference all over the world remotely, maybe once every month. I would never be flying to Ghana or to Burkina Faso, but I'm connecting with these people and sharing my story and inspiring them. So that's pretty much been the pandemic for me. Definitely difficult situation. I would not philosophize about this, but I always try to keep that perspective of gratitude.
Well, that truly is the power of the internet. I mean, you and I connected during COVID. We had heard of your story and we wanted to talk to you. And when I heard it for the first time, it moved me. It made me realize that there is power in everybody to improve, to change, to be better when you set your mind for it.
Wow.
We had one of the questions that have come in asked, how did you get from IT to IS? Or if you had a recommendation for anybody interested in information technology or information security, what would you recommend for them to do, to read, to learn, to pursue, to get certified, to mentor? What would be your number one recommendation for them?
I would say the number one recommendation is be proactive about it. And that's what I see every day. I mentor a lot of people. A lot of them aspire to move into cybersecurity. Is every switch. When you want to switch your career, you're going to want it enough, because it's going to be easy. Sometimes it can take maybe 3 months and you can be lucky to bump into the right person in the right time. But sometimes it can be protracted. But if you want it enough, cybersecurity is only going to grow bigger and bigger in the next 50 years to 100 years. I don't see this trend going back. It's definitely one of the fastest growing domains in cybersecurity. It's deeply rewarding. The work is fascinating. I think both Bob and yourself can testify to this. It's an amazing, there's never a dull moment for me. You need to be proactive about it. There's a lot of certifications, there's more than 60 cybersecurity certifications out there, but you need to be smart as well. And that's where the idea of mentorship comes in handy. If there's one thing that I could have done better earlier was to find a mentor, because a lot of the things that I've discovered in my life has been through trial and error. And I could have saved myself, years of my precious life if I found a mentor earlier on who is able to share their mistakes and guide me through my career journey. So long story short, cybersecurity is hot right now. It's gonna get hotter, and the journey to transition is definitely worthwhile. Myself, when I transitioned from IT risk to cybersecurity, I looked for a job internally, and they said, we can take you, we think you've got potential, but you're gonna forget about your IT risk manager title. We're gonna hire you as an IT risk analyst. And I came from here to here. I was presenting to IT executive teams, but I took up the IT risk analyst jobs. I was organizing pen tests, risk registers, and all the donkey work in the industry. I was like an administrator, but it was worth it, because sometimes for us to go up, we need to take one step bottom. I've done it twice in my career. I've sacrificed money, I've sacrificed job titles, but it was all worth it.
That's an interesting perspective, because it's not always a path ahead. Sometimes you have to double back, choose a different path that will get you ahead, not necessarily faster, but on a more stable road. Let's go with a little bit different of a question. What is the one thing that you could tell the audience? Keep in mind that we have everything from students to other executives to peers of ours on the call, that they would be surprised to hear from you as a CISO in Australia. What is one thing that you find that they really shouldn't hear from you?
Oh, can you reframe that question more?
I'll be a little bit more blunt. We have a variety of audience, variety of people, because when I think about giving a recommendation, I always try to tailor it to the audience, but we have a wide variety of people on it. What is one thing as a CISO, as an executive, where you are with what you do and with your background, that they would be surprised to hear that you would state?
Wow.
Don't give up on your dreams. Don't sacrifice your habits. I don't know. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but trying to give you an idea.
No, that helps. Oh, no, I think maybe it's, I live a much more balanced life than what a lot of people think. I think that's maybe, I spend tremendous amount with my kids. I catch up with my friends, my boys, my Zimbabwean friends here. I think that's pretty much it. I seriously get surprised, and this is something that's maybe that may be controversial in the cybersecurity circles, because when you go on LinkedIn, there's a lot of complaining in our industry that CISOs are stressed, they're drinking their lives away. And, but for me, that ability to prioritize what matters has really not just helped me in my professional life, in my personal life, but in my work life as well. We don't have to mitigate every possible cyber threat. We work with a very highly focused cybersecurity strategy, and we actually have got a set of non-negotiable cybersecurity controls as well. So that for me creates tremendous amounts of time for me to do other things. So I'm not just stuck in my work. I'm not a nerd or anything, So I think that's something that maybe surprises a lot of people, because if you go on LinkedIn, I am very active on LinkedIn. I've got more than 30,000 connections. I'm always providing a lot of content and blogs and everything. But I live a very balanced life because it just comes down to prioritization. Not sure if I got that right, but anyway.
Keeping your private life and public life separate, because we can give out knowledge, we can help people, we can mentor people, but I don't necessarily want them knowing my kids' names, right? That's not appropriate for role.
Sure.
When many CISOs develop a brand, I have mine, you have yours, Bob is well known as well. it's kind of a public persona. We put ourselves out there. We're on LinkedIn. We have a lot of followers.
Yeah.
What is your opinion for anybody that wants to start to build their personal brand?
Yeah, I would say in cybersecurity or uh, building a personal brand is maybe your most powerful weapon. If you want to accelerate your career path, if you build a strong personal brand, you can define your life and live it the way you want to be. And for me, that's been maybe one of the most important things that I've done. But it requires, again, it requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of authenticity. I shared this with you, Maury, the last time. Back in 2016, when I put up my first LinkedIn post, when I won an award here in Sydney, Australia, I deleted that post 6 times because it was very difficult for me to embrace my story of poverty, of the way I grew up. I never used to tell people about this because growing up in poverty was always a source of shame. No one wanted to play with the poor boy, or if you have no voice. So for me, it was tremendously difficult for me to embrace that narrative. I deleted that post 6 times. The first words that I put in that post was, I got my first pair of shoes when I was 12. And then, write a small paragraph, deleted it. I eventually gathered the guts to put out my story. So I posted and I went to bed because I didn't want to, I was so scared of negative judgment. I woke up the next morning, that story had gone viral, got more than 100,000 views in less than 24 hours, almost 6,000 likes and thousands of messages from people all over the world. I've never seen such an outpouring of generosity, empathy, and kindness.
Did he freeze?
From people, from America, every corner of the world. It was powerful. So anyway, long story short is that what opened up. That's why for me, being authentic, being myself, I can never be the best version of myself if I'm trying to be another Maury. I can only be the best version of myself if I'm trying to be myself. So that's been very powerful. So that's why for me, if you go on my LinkedIn, I talk a lot about cybersecurity because that's my expertise. But I also talk about my journey and the lessons and the failures that have come across the way. That has really endeared me so much to a lot of people. So when I stepped out of my permanent CISO role and became a virtual CISO, it was very easy for me to pick up new jobs because people knew who I was. I had a personal brand. People downloaded my book, So for me, that is very, very powerful. I think that's a brilliant question from whoever asked it.
Phil, it's really important because no one should be ashamed of their past. Yeah. We all have history, whether it's tragedy, whether we were given a silver spoon and expected everything but didn't know how to do anything and overcame that. Yeah. There's no shame in a person's past. It's only growth in being better. Every time I hear you tell that story, it's humbling to think how far someone can go and then how much potential we have across the globe that is untapped, and people need to know it's possible.
Yeah,
we're going to wrap it up with one more question. I'm sorry, Bob.
I just want to add real quick. I mean, the inspirational story is so relevant, especially in cybersecurity, where I know a lot of people here, I mentor, whatever, they struggle with their history. We're not good enough. We can't get into cybersecurity. And I think your story needs to be told globally. It really does. And I think the influence of that and the impact of that, at least here in the United States, would be tremendous.
And this, maybe COVID has helped, as Phil, as you said, we would never have connected. And here we are across the planet telling a story that's so important for everyone to realize. And it's just that important. I want to remind everyone that if you have questions, put them in the chat, put them in the Q&A. We're going to get to them in a second. I'm going to hit Phil up with one more question, and it's out there, Phil. I promise it's out there. If you had all the money in the world, unlimited funds, what would you do with your life?
Wow. I would certainly lower my golf handicap. Uh,
True.
I'll go back and reconstruct my swing and play better and maybe have a game with Bob and maybe win. But anyway, more, on a serious note, I would go back to my place where I come from, and I would build a school. And that's certainly something that I'm going to do in the next few years. So that's my baby. That's my dream. Go out there and give those kids. There's so many bright kids. Back there, you would not even believe it. If they had opportunities, they would end up at Harvard. They would end up solving big problems. They would go and graduate with PhDs in computer science from Stanford University, but they never make it to high school. And for me, that breaks my heart. And when I was there back in Zimbabwe, things were tremendously difficult, like I said. Luckily, I never had excuses of sorry for myself, but things are much harder now. So my goal is, when I make money, I'll go back and I'll build a school and I'll sustain it for as long as I live, and give those kids tremendous opportunities to compete at a global stage.
Phil, I think that is an incredible aspirational goal. And if you ever need the help, as we've been talking, giving back to kids, helping educate, it's why we do these series. I think you have a lot of support from the members that are on the
I
call.
appreciate it.
Let's start hitting you with some of the questions in the last few minutes that we've got.
Yeah.
First question, anonymous. Is there a similar shortage of security talent in Australia? And is it a big pain point for you as a CISO?
Okay, great. Yes, definitely, it's a big pain point. But for me, the skills shortage, not necessarily maybe in the technical space. We have got maybe quite a number of people who are, quite adept at managing network security, firewalls, IDPs. The key thing, so the big problem is the technology landscape and digital transformation is moving much faster than a lot of cybersecurity professionals can keep up. So with all these workloads being now run from public cloud computing, and keeping up, getting cybersecurity architects who can develop hybrid cybersecurity architectures, securing on-prem workloads and private clouds and public clouds and bringing it all together. I think that's a big gap from a technical skills perspective. The biggest gap is, finding those cybersecurity managers or senior security professionals who can communicate cybersecurity in the language of the business, which is money. I think that is where we have got the biggest gap, because we'll never solve this issue unless we bring senior business leaders on the journey. And that's where I see there's a lot of tension. A lot of CISOs that I deal with, they say board members and senior executives have to educate themselves in cybersecurity. I don't think that will happen anytime soon. These guys are very busy. I was reading a report saying a standard board pack in some of these listed organizations is 800 pages. So cybersecurity is just a small section of other risks that they manage. To think that they will equip themselves to understand PCI, ISO 27001, that's far away. Us as cybersecurity professionals have to teach ourselves, how can we tell those stories and position cybersecurity as a growth advantage, not as a business compliance issue, and really help us to expand into new jurisdictions, safeguard the stock prices and so forth. So that's where the biggest challenge is for me. Having said that, though, the biggest frustration, because I mentor a lot of people who aspire to get into cybersecurity, it's very, very hard for them to get those internship roles. So us as CISOs, we complain that there's a shortage of talent, but we are not opening the doors to get these aspiring people to transition from other domains into cybersecurity or come from uni. A lot of people I mentor, they're looking for unpaid internships and they can't find them. So that's why for me as a mentor, it's very difficult because, these people are ambitious, but they can't find the foot in the door. So that's where it's a complex puzzle.
It is a complex puzzle, and I'm watching some of the chats go around here, and you're hitting a nerve with a lot of the attendees. One of the questions, and I'll field this one, Phil, is what is the starting salary in cybersecurity? And I can't give you a number, but I can tell you it is now becoming a level playing field, and that's due to COVID. Because if you were thinking that you got a really high salary in San Francisco and maybe not in Oklahoma or Nebraska,
Okay.
with everybody working from home, if you're talented in Nebraska and can do the work remotely, that playing field of that gap is now leveling out. So being on lockdown, having the internet, being able to work remotely, you could be in a very rural location and command a very high salary if you can break through. And that's part of the problem, is you have to be able to get that break. But all you got to keep on doing is knocking on doors. And when that door opens, just take it. Phil, we also had another question. Where can the attendees find your books? There was a lot of interest and a lot of comments of people going here, try here. Where can they find them if they want to read what you've published?
Okay. It's on Amazon and any other channel that sells books. So it's called The 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience. And not sure actually if there's people who have been asking questions in the Q&A, because I can always, I would like to give maybe 5 digital copies to some of the participants on this call. So I will email the book to yourself, and you can, I don't know how you give them, but
Phil, the easiest way to do it is just, what is your handle on LinkedIn? And you pick the first 5, right?
Great. Yeah, the first 5. Yep.
So what's your link on LinkedIn? Do you have an at Phil Zongo or Philemon Zongo?
If you say Philemon Phil Zongo, there's only, my
Fantastic.
first name and surname very unique.
So first 5, it's got to be the people that are live, even better.
Awesome.
You're going to fill it up once it's recorded, which is fantastic. Awesome. We have another question that came across. Can you name a couple of products that you would recommend that aspiring cybersecurity professionals to learn to better their career or potentially open those doors? Like, what's a good SIM product to learn? What's a good anti-malware product? What are top products that you see people needing expertise in? And this is not an endorsement of any vendor. It's just a perspective.
Yeah, so there's a few domains. It's number one is, SIM. Not necessarily, I won't name any products anyway, but your ability to configure SIMs and, get those alerts, down to a very low level. I think that's brilliant. Other areas as well include, I would really emphasize on cloud security. If you can be a master of, one of those cloud, Microsoft Cloud or AWS, I think really growth points there. A number of firewalls as well, but it's very hard for me to name products because of the work that I do in the Cyber Leadership Institute. Because once I get into that zone, then a lot of people want me to come and endorse their products, and so
fair enough. But the disciplines themselves,
it's a bit tricky.
Yeah, you can go look at any of these disciplines on an analyst's reviews or even in periodicals. Find out the leaders. And believe it or not, there's tons of free material out there. Phil, we're at the top of the hour right now. And this has been, I love speaking to you. I'm hoping somewhere in the future we can get together and shake hands and meet in person, but we're doing it through the internet today. I just love speaking with you. Your story is inspirational, and you've given us great knowledge and feedback as to help a lot of people benefit their careers and get into cybersecurity. Bob, I'm going to pass it back to you in a second, but Phil, do you have any closing words for our attendees today?
I always say, why do I share my story? I share my story because I always tell the youngsters I work with that if a barefooted boy like me from Mondoro can rise past so many obstacles and achieve what I've managed to achieve so far in that space of time, it's very important to remember that we can all rewrite our stories. as long as we believe and we keep acting even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles. I think, that's for me. We are only restricted by the bounds of our own belief systems.
That's incredibly
That's it.
powerful.
Thank you so much for
Authentic
having me.
beliefs, resilience, positive intent, and most importantly, humility, right? We can't learn everything. We can read and read and read, but we cannot learn everything. Thank you so much, Phil. Bob, back to you to wrap us up. We do have one question of when will this be posted and where for the audience, because it looks like some team members want to share this with their peers.
Yeah, I just put the answer out there, Maury.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, Phil, it's been an honor. It's been an absolute honor to share this hour with you. We could probably go on for another hour. I'm sure we could. So thank you so much. And we need to do this again, really do. So thank everyone for attending. And just to give you a heads up, what we're going to be doing for the next 3 months. So in July, we will have Christopher Zell, CISO Wendy's, will be our guest in July. In August will be Anahi Santiago, the CISO from Christianacare, the largest healthcare in Delaware. And in September, Nancy Hunter, the CISO from the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, will be our guest. So watch out for the invites that will be coming out. And for the next 3 months, those will be our guests. So it should be great panels coming up. But tonight was extraordinary. And I am so thrilled, Phil, that you came and blessed us with your attendance. And thank you so much.
Phil, pleasure as always. Be safe, be well, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Stay
Take
safe.
care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.